They mocked our history. They forgot our warriors. But history is not just written in books, it lives in our blood. And when the blood boils, the warriors return. Today, we bring them back, the legends who were lost in time. Are you ready to witness the truth? For centuries, our ancestors built civilizations, fought battles, and forged legacies that shaped the world. Their names were once spoken with pride, their deeds echoed in the hearts of generations. But as time passed, their stories faded, buried beneath the weight of modern skepticism. People began to call them myths, mere figments of exaggerated folklore. They never existed, they said. They were just stories, they mocked. Our history was ridiculed, our warriors forgotten. The pride of our forefathers was turned into nothing more than bedtime tales. The courage, the sacrifices, the victories, reduced to fiction by those who refused to believe. But history is not so easily erased. It is not just ink on paper, it is carved into the land, whispered by the wind, and carried in the blood of those who refuse to forget. And we? We are the ones who remember. When they laughed at our past, we made a vow, we would bring back the warriors of our history. Not as mere names in books, not as forgotten legends, but as living, breathing warriors once more. It began as a dream, a distant possibility. But dreams have a way of turning into reality when fueled by determination. We searched, we studied, and we uncovered secrets long buried in time. Ancient scrolls, lost relics, forgotten rituals, each clue led us closer to the impossible. Until the day finally came. The day we stood at the edge of history and defied the boundaries of time itself. They said it couldn't be done. They said history cannot be revived. But they were wrong. Because the warriors of the past were never truly gone. They were only waiting to return. And now, they are back. Our enemies laughed at us once. But now, they tremble. The past has awakened, and history will no longer be ignored. This is the beginning of a new era, an era where the forgotten warriors rise once more. Are you ready to witness the return of legends? Because this is their story, and it is far from over. For years, our ancestors' glory was dismissed as mere fantasy. The tales of their conquests, their unmatched bravery, and their undying spirit were reduced to folklore, told to children as bedtime stories. Our enemies, those who sought to erase our identity, laughed at our history, calling it an illusion. But deep within the forgotten chambers of time, the truth remained, waiting to be uncovered. Our history was never lost, it was merely hidden, waiting for the right moment to return. It all began when we discovered an ancient manuscript buried beneath the ruins of an old temple. The inscription spoke of a lost order of warriors, fighters who once defended our land with unparalleled strength. According to the text, these warriors were not ordinary men, they were chosen by destiny itself, their souls bound to the earth, waiting to be called upon again in times of great peril. At first, many among us dismissed it as a myth, another legend passed down through generations. But some of us believed. Some of us knew that history often holds secrets that only the worthy can unlock. And so, we began our search. Chapter 2, The Path to Awakening. Our journey led us to the forgotten lands, places untouched by time, where echoes of the past still lingered in the air. The deeper we dug, the more we found, ancient weapons preserved as if they had never rusted, paintings depicting battles that history had chosen to forget, and sacred chants carved into stone. One night, as we sat around the fire, an old sage approached us. His eyes carried the weight of centuries, and his voice trembled with wisdom. "You seek the warriors of the past," he said. "But to bring them back, you must prove yourselves worthy. You must awaken not only their spirits but also the warrior within yourselves." His words sent shivers down our spines. This was not just about reviving the past, it was about becoming part of it. We followed his guidance, learning the ancient ways, training as they trained, chanting as they chanted, forging our spirits in the fire of discipline and sacrifice. Each trial we endured brought us closer to the truth, each step revealing more about the warriors we sought to bring back. Chapter 3, The Ritual of Resurrection. The final test came when we discovered a sacred site, hidden beneath layers of time and secrecy. It was a battlefield, a place where the greatest warriors had made their last stand. According to legend, their souls remained bound to the land, waiting for a call to rise once more. The ritual was complex, its details written in the ancient manuscript we had found. As we stood in the center of the battlefield, the air around us grew heavy, charged with an energy that had been dormant for centuries. We recited the sacred chants, our voices merging with the whispers of history. The ground trembled, and a gust of wind howled through the ruins. Shadows began to form around us, at first mere silhouettes, but then, slowly, they took shape. And then, it happened. Before our eyes, the warriors of the past emerged from the mist, their armor gleaming, their weapons ready. Their eyes burned with the fire of warriors who had been denied their place in history. They had returned, not as mere memories, but as the legends they truly were. Chapter 4, The Return of Legends. The world was not ready for their return. Our enemies, those who had mocked our history, now stood in terror. The warriors who had once been dismissed as myths now marched across the land, reclaiming the honor that had been stolen from them. But they did not return for revenge. They returned to remind the world of who they were and what they stood for. Their presence reignited the spirit of our people, awakening a pride that had been buried for far too long. The warriors trained us in their ways, passing down the knowledge that had been lost through time. They told us the stories that history had tried to erase, revealing the truths that had been hidden for generations. And then, the final battle came. Our enemies, realizing the power that had been unleashed, gathered their forces to destroy us once and for all. They believed that even with the warriors of the past by our side, we could not stand against their modern might. But they underestimated the power of history. As the battle began, the warriors led us into the fight, their skills unmatched, their determination unbreakable. They fought not just with weapons, but with the strength of their legacy. Each strike they delivered was a reminder of who they were, of who we were. And in the end, we stood victorious. Chapter 5, The Legacy continues. The warriors of the past had fulfilled their purpose. They had returned to restore our pride, to remind us that history is not something to be mocked or forgotten, it is something to be honored and protected. As the sun rose over the battlefield, the warriors looked at us one last time. Their mission was complete, and it was time for them to rest once more. One by one, they vanished into the wind, their spirits returning to the land that had always been their home. But they did not leave us empty-handed. They left behind their knowledge, their strength, and their undying spirit. And so, we carry their legacy forward. No longer will our history be mocked. No longer will our warriors be forgotten. Because we are their descendants. And as long as we remember, they will never truly be gone. The sky turned crimson as the sun dipped behind the horizon. A heavy silence loomed over the battlefield, broken only by the distant echoes of marching feet. Our enemies had arrived. Their armies stretched as far as the eye could see, banners waving in the wind, their weapons gleaming under the dying light. For years, they had mocked our history. For years, they had dismissed our warriors as myths. But today, they would learn the truth. The revived warriors of the past stood beside us, their faces calm but their eyes burning with the fire of battle. These were the same warriors who had once defended our land, who had once bled and died for it. And today, they stood once more, not as ghosts, but as legends reborn. Their leader, an ancient general whose name had been long forgotten by history, turned to us. His voice, though worn by time, was filled with unshakable resolve. "This is not just a battle," he said. "This is a reckoning. Today, we fight not just for victory, but for the truth. We fight for those who came before us and those who will come after. We fight so that our people will never be forgotten again. A roar erupted from our ranks. The ground trembled beneath us as we prepared to charge. The moment of reckoning had come. Chapter 7, The Clash of Eras. The enemy struck first. A barrage of arrows darkened the sky, descending upon us like a deadly storm. But our warriors did not falter. Shields rose, swords flashed, and the first wave of battle began. The ancient warriors fought with a precision and ferocity unlike anything the enemy had ever seen. They moved like shadows, their blades cutting through the ranks of those who had doubted them. They had spent centuries waiting for this moment, and now that they had returned, they fought with a fury that could not be contained. I fought alongside them, feeling the weight of history in every strike. It was as if I could hear the voices of our ancestors guiding me, reminding me that this battle was bigger than myself. The enemy had numbers on their side, but we had something stronger: purpose. With every fallen warrior, our resolve only grew. We were not just fighting to survive. We were fighting to reclaim what had been stolen from us. Chapter 8, The Betrayal. Just as victory seemed within reach, a shocking betrayal shattered our momentum. One of our own, someone we had trusted, turned against us. He had been seduced by the enemy's promises, lured by wealth and power in exchange for our downfall. In the chaos, he struck down one of the greatest warriors among us, the ancient general who had led us into battle. Time seemed to freeze as the old warrior fell, his sword slipping from his grasp. The battlefield grew silent, the weight of his loss crushing us. The enemy cheered, believing this was their moment of triumph. They thought that with our leader gone, we would crumble. But they underestimated us. Chapter 9, The Rise of the Forgotten. The fallen general's final words echoed in my mind: never let them erase us. And I knew, this battle was far from over. Fueled by rage, sorrow, and a burning sense of duty, we rose once more. If our ancestors had taught us anything, it was that a warrior's true strength is not in his weapon, but in his will. The enemy had taken our leader, but they could not take our spirit. With a deafening roar, we charged again, this time with a force so unstoppable that even the enemy's overwhelming numbers could not hold us back. The revived warriors, seeing the unbreakable resolve in us, fought harder than ever before. They became one with the battlefield, their skills unmatched, their movements a testament to the history they carried. One by one, the enemy fell. Their confidence turned to fear. Their arrogance turned to desperation. And finally, the betrayer, the one who had sold us out, stood before me. Chapter 10, The Final Duel. The battlefield faded around us as we faced each other. This was no longer about armies. This was about the truth, about justice, about reclaiming what had been lost. He smirked, believing himself untouchable. You fight for ghosts, he sneered. But ghosts don't win wars. I gripped my sword tighter. They are not ghosts, I said. They are history. And today, history wins. The duel began. He was fast, but I was faster. He was skilled, but I was determined. With every strike, I felt the presence of the ancient warriors guiding me, their strength flowing through me. He fought for greed, but I fought for something greater. In the final moment, as he lunged forward, I sidestepped and delivered the decisive blow. His sword fell to the ground, his eyes wide with disbelief. It's over, I said, as he collapsed. Chapter 11, The End of the War. With their leader defeated and their forces in ruins, the enemy finally surrendered. The battlefield, once soaked in blood and chaos, now stood silent. The revived warriors gathered around the fallen general's body. Their time had come to an end, but they had accomplished what they had returned for. They had proven that history could never truly be erased, that legends could never truly die. One by one, they began to fade, their spirits returning to the earth, their duty fulfilled. As the last warrior disappeared into the wind, I knew this was not the end. They may have left, but their legacy would remain. Chapter 12, A New Dawn. The war was over. Our history had been reclaimed, our people had been freed from the chains of doubt and ridicule. We built a monument on the battlefield, not just for those who had fallen, but for those who had returned. The world would never again forget our past. The warriors of history had risen once more, not just in battle, but in the hearts of those who would carry their stories forward. And as I stood before the monument, I whispered a vow to the wind: you will never be forgotten again. The battlefield was no longer a place of war but of remembrance. The blood had dried, the swords had been laid to rest, and the cries of battle had faded into history. But the echoes of what had happened here would never be forgotten. For years, they had mocked us. They had called our history a myth, our warriors nothing more than stories told to entertain. But now, they knew the truth. Now, the world had seen what we had always known: our past was real, our warriors were real, and their spirit could never be erased. As I walked through the ruins of the battlefield, I could still feel their presence. The warriors who had returned, the ones who had fought beside us, the ones who had given their second life for this land. They had come back when we needed them most, and now, they had returned to the winds, to the earth, to the pages of history where they belonged. But even though they were gone, they had left something behind: a lesson, a legacy, and an unbreakable truth. Chapter 14, Honoring the Warriors of the Past. After the war ended, we knew we could not let this moment fade into obscurity. Too many times, history had been rewritten, erased, buried beneath lies and ignorance. We had been given a second chance, a chance to make sure the world never forgot again. So, we built a monument. At the heart of the battlefield, we erected a grand structure, carved from the very stones that had once witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Upon its surface, we engraved the names of the warriors, the fallen heroes, the ones who had returned from the past to fight for the future. We gathered every scroll, every piece of knowledge, every fragment of our history that had been hidden away, and we restored it. The stories of our warriors were no longer just whispers in the dark, they were now immortalized in ink and stone, in the hearts and minds of our people. And most importantly, we passed these stories down. Fathers told their children about the day the past came back to life. Elders shared tales of the battles fought, the sacrifices made, and the victory that had restored our honor. Schools taught the names of the warriors, ensuring that future generations would never forget the blood that had been spilled to protect their legacy. Chapter 15, A New Era of Pride. The world had changed. No longer did people mock our history. No longer did they scoff at our stories. Instead, they respected us. They feared us. They believed us. Other nations, the ones who had once ridiculed us, now sought to understand. Historians arrived, eager to uncover the secrets of how we had brought the past back to life. Scholars debated, trying to explain the impossible. But we knew. It had never been magic. It had never been a trick. It had been faith. It had been the unshakable belief that history is more than just words on paper, it is alive, breathing, waiting to be remembered. And we had remembered. Chapter 16, The Warrior's Promise. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself standing before the monument once more. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the voices of those who had fought beside us. I closed my eyes and felt them there, just beyond the veil of time. You are not forgotten, I whispered. You never will be. And in that moment, I knew their fight had not been in vain. The world had tried to bury them, but we had unearthed them. The enemy had tried to erase them, but we had carved their names into eternity. They had returned when we needed them most. And if ever the world dared to forget again, if ever our people found themselves mocked, ridiculed, or oppressed once more, they would return again. That was their promise. That was our legacy. Chapter 17, The Eternal Cycle. History is not a straight line, it is a circle. The past is never truly gone, it waits, watching, ready to rise when the time comes. And as long as there are those who remember, as long as there are those who refuse to let history be rewritten, the warriors of the past will never truly be lost. They will live on in the stories we tell, in the battles we fight, and in the blood that runs through our veins. And one day, when the world needs them again, when our people once more stand at the edge of darkness, they will return. Because legends never die. And neither do warriors. The wind carried the whispers of the past as I stood before the monument, my fingers tracing the names carved into the stone. Each name was a reminder of those who had returned, those who had fought, and those who had proven that history is not something to be erased, it is something to be honored. The battle was over. The war had been won. But the journey of remembrance would never end. I turned to the horizon, where the sun bathed the land in golden light. The same land that had once been stained with blood, the same land that had once been ridiculed for its history, now stood in peace, respected and honored. As I walked away from the monument, I felt their presence one last time. The warriors who had returned, the ones who had fought beside us, they were not truly gone. Their bodies had faded, their weapons had turned to dust, but their spirit remained. Because legends never die. And as long as we remember them, they will always be with us. Their battle is over. Their duty is fulfilled. But their legacy? Their legacy will live forever.